Felix Ofosu-Kwakye there, joining me this morning for this edition of the show. Bashiratu Kamal is Fellow Center for Social Justice. Inusa Hussaini is former MP, Tamale Central, and he's a former minister of different portfolios. Frank Davis is chairman, Constitutional Legal Committee of the New Patriotic Party. Oliver Bakavomo is Constitutional Rights and Policy Strategy Advisor of the Democracy Hub. And Suleiman Abrahima is Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us on Newsfile this morning. Right, so we have seen how the president has gone about his appointment so far, not only in terms of the ministers, but also in the office of the president. We had a list that's named some 10 people: Joyce Bar Mokhtari, presidential advisor and special aide to the president; Stanislav Dogbe, deputy chief of staff operations; Nanaoye Bampo Ado, deputy chief of staff administration. We have Seth Emmanuel Tepe, former finance minister, as presidential advisor on the economy; Professor Francis Dodu, the sportsman, as presidential advisor, National Anti-Corruption Program; Larry Bevrolate. There were speculations that he may go into the Ministry of National Security, or he may be responsible for Interior or something in that regard. He's special envoy to the Alliance of Sahelian States, and that's a big one we are looking at. We isolate to look at also Joyce Bauer. We'll look at that one as well. Then Nanaya Jantwa, who is presidential staffer from the CPP. Beatrice Anan Fio is presidential staffer. Shamima Muslim, deputy presidential spokesperson. And Professor Kweku Dansobuafo is cabinet secretary. So let's begin with you, Inusa Hussaini. This is your party sitting on the sidelines and watching. Am I right when I say sitting on the sidelines and watching? Are you impressed?
Well, I think that it's proper for me to say good morning to your good self, to my brother, friend, and comrade, Oliver Bakavomo. Good.
Was it your birthday yesterday?
Yesterday, yes.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Many years and looking young,
growing younger.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is to take good care of yourself. Not
right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And so, and to all the other panelists who will be on this program, I think I can say that so far, so very good. It appears to me that John Dramani Mahama, the President of the Republic of Ghana, is so determined, is bold, and decisive. He knows he has 4 years, so he's choosing his ministers carefully, working within the constraints of the Constitution, dealing with a huge numbers in Parliament, trying to recruit the best from Parliament who align to the values or to his values and his desire to leave a lasting legacy for this country. So when you have a president who is constrained by the number of years that he can be in office, the number of times that he can present himself for president,
and the number of ministers he has imposed on himself.
The number of ministers he has imposed, that limitation. There is an invidious responsibility placed on him not to joke with his appointments. And in trying to fulfill his mandate against the background of the fact that the people of Ghana repose tremendous confidence in him to reset this country, he has to choose carefully. And in choosing carefully, people will be disappointed. I mean, you know that in this country, many politicians have a filthy sense of entitlement. And so some have been waiting, thinking that the president would get them into offices. Some have been greatly disappointed because of their contribution to the success of the president. But you are looking at the president who is acutely aware that he cannot fail the people of this country, that he cannot sink below the depths that the MPP sank, that in electing to reset the country, he was communicating to the people that he will do better and put the country on a sound pedestal. So recruitment to carry out this mandate, recruitment for this vision will be tough, will be disappointing to some people, and will have to depart from his earlier ways of doing things. And that you can see that clearly. Yes, and again, you have 187 members of parliament on the majority side of government. So it is unlike any other parliament we've had in this Fourth Republic. Article 78.1 says a majority of his ministers must come from parliament. Now, majority of ministers means majority. But here you have 187 to deal with. When you had 160, 157, you could manage. But you have 187.
Is 187 the caucus?
The caucus.
Or including those who have decided to sit with the NDC? Those
who have decided to sit with NDC now are counted as part, and you know how parliament is structured.
Right.
Are counted as part of the majority caucus. And in the past, some of them have been given ministerial positions. So you have to deal with all of them. The recruitment process is not an easy task. And that's why you see people being moved. That's why you see that in discussions, the public have suggested that some people be put in certain positions.
He's done 42 so far, 18 more to go. After marking the minority leader and ranking on the confirmation committee, says the president should just apologize to Ghanaians that he didn't really mean it when he says 60, and he needs more than 60 to govern the country, and bring as many numbers as he wants, and they will approve them.
No, we are not going to accept that. As a member of the NDC, the president cannot violate his own promise to the people. We will resist that. And I'm disappointed in Afenyo Markin. When President Mahama said, as a flag bearer of the NDC, that he was going to work with 60 ministers, Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia reduced the 60 to 50. It's Afenyo Markin's suggestion that Bawumia was not being honest with Ghanaians when he said he would work with 50. And that if Bawumia had won, he would have apologized to Ghanaians and raised the number beyond 50. You see, we are running a constitution and a government that clearly must win the trust and confidence of the people. We have great trepidation on the way politicians and the political class toy with the lives of the people of this country. We believe that this country can develop and develop with very decisive, bold-minded leaders. That things that we have been doing with careless abandon, it will take time to do them right. We can get them right. And so when John Dramani Mahama suggested to the people that he was going to run 60 ministers, Ghanaians saw something new in that. Yes, I've heard people say that 60 ministers in financial terms, the quantum of savings is not that huge. But when you escalate that to include what it will mean to the Ghanaians in terms of the desire of the president to cut out waste, when you escalate that to our foreign partners, to see how recklessness and impunity is being controlled and checked by this, when you escalate that to deal with the issue of nepotism, you are working with 60. And so in the 60, How are you going to deal with your family members?
The chairman's a committee that you actively participated in, not as a member, had proposed 25.
25.
And then subsequently after the validation conference, where you, Kujetu and the rest of them were, Setekwe was there as well, it was increased to 55.
Yes. Yes, because...
So we can even do with less.
We can do with less. 50. And I agree with you. We can do with less. And there are examples about, everywhere in democracies, good examples that they're doing with less. You see, Obama came here and signaled to us how we could do with less ministers. He told us to build strong institutions. If you have strong institutions, accountability, transparency, delivery of prosperity will be guaranteed. To the extent that, talking about the capitalist system, to the extent that you build strong social institutions with a sense of justice to mitigate the excesses of capitalism.
Okay, let me go around and return to you on maybe single out appointment of Bevrolati as envoy to the Sahelian states, military juntas who are overseeing these countries, even though some of them are receiving the loudest applause across the world. The ECOWAS is not happy about them and their breakaway from the regional bloc. So what are we doing? What are we getting into as Ghana, designating an envoy to these places? Or maybe that is actually strategic to try to woo them back into the democratic fold, so to speak. Suleimana, thanks for joining us. Hello, Sule. Okay. If Sule cannot hear me, it's Bashirat. Hello, Bash. Please unmute your mic. Okay.
Samson, sorry. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. From where you sit, what's your assessment of the appointment so far? Some of them are actually attracting indignation of NDC, foot soldiers. They say the NCA, Mr. Fianco, cannot be there. Reverend Fianco cannot be there. He's MPP true and true. The Ghana Revenue Authority, they say the man appointed there should be removed. Actually, they masked up. They were trying to mask up there, and there were numbers there as well, trying to sort of, I don't know, if physically stop him from occupying that office.
Yes, thank you so much, Samson. Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Clearly.
Okay, thank you. So I think first, let me comment on the appointment and in terms of inclusivity, which is also very critical before I come to the question you asked. So far, in some parts, our president has done very well with in terms of the appointment. And as he had always mentioned on his campaign tour and after he won, his interest is not just about political affiliations, but also about getting Ghanaians and citizens who will be able to deliver on the mandate. And also in terms of the political party manifesto that the NDC had used and promised Ghanaians. And I think for a country where we've always spoken about the winner takes all and why it takes away from us enjoying the expertise of other Ghanaians. The president has done well, and as much as some of the party rank are going to not be too happy about the caliber of some people who have been appointed, I think it is fair to say that the president will know what he's doing, and these decisions that he's been taking is not a singular decision coming from him as a person. Then also, in terms of the appointment that have been made so far, whilst in some parts our president has done so well, in terms of the numbers, in terms of balancing women and men and all of that. In other parts, when you look at it as a whole, it has not been really encouraging. So whilst we have passed the affirmative action bill, the bill does not say that we measure on a whole, but it does say that it is measured at different level of all appointments. So if it is districts, at the district level, we measure that. And if it is at the ministerial level, we measure that. But as we speak, the appointment of ministers out of 42, we can say that we only have 7 women, which is woefully inadequate, 16.7. But if you look at other areas, the president has done well with balancing the equation. Then I also saw a press statement from our colleagues, persons living with some form of disability, where they were also expressing their disappointment that so far there has not been any representation from the community. But as much as possible, it is important that whilst we are craving to build an inclusive government, we look at all people and the minority groups that we have in our society. So to me, I think on the whole, it's been good, but disappointing. And I'm very sure that we should be bracing ourselves more for disappointment in the coming days because the appointments are not done. Then in terms of the outcry on social media, I mean, for the past days, it's been dramatic on social media, where people have even resorted to saying that people never knew that their own godfathers and godmothers also had godmothers and godfathers. So they are all getting disappointed in terms of how the appointments have been. But our interest as Ghanaians should be, will people be able to deliver, or is it going to be business as usual for us? So if our major interest is to revamp our economy from the crisis that we all find ourselves in, and not just the economy, relationship, external relationship, our foreign policy, and all other things, I think for now it's too early for us to start complaining because we've not even crossed the 120-day mark. And there are always opportunities for reshuffling and all of that. So we should take our time and watch as things unfold gradually in our faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Bashiratu. And Mr. Frank Davis, watching from where you sit, is it impressive? Of course, questions are being raised about some appointment being done without resort to the Council of State, which is yet to be established. I don't think this will be new, though. What do you say?
Anyway, thank you very much, and a very pleasant morning to all your viewers and cherished listeners. Inusa, you refused to say good morning to me, but I will say good morning.
Oh, Frank, sorry.
You deliberately my name and said good morning to Oliver. Oliver, morning.
Good morning, Frank. I hope you're doing
well. My troublesome lawyer. Yeah, something good morning to. Anyway, I must say from the outset that I am enamored by the fact that His Excellency the President, John Mahama, intends to stick to his select number of ministers of 60. I only will wish that he is able to stick to that number. After all, our presidential flag bearer and candidate, as at then, Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, intended to govern this country with 50 ministers. So if President Mahama is sticking to his list of 60, we all have to commend him. And at least he's done what is right by the people and is keeping to his campaign and manifesto promise. For that, I doff my hat. But the ministers, of course, I am not in a position to choose or select ministers for the president. But the names that have come out so far, well, we've known some of them in their public and private lives. And sitting here, I cannot for any moment, without any fear of equivocation or contradiction, I don't see how my learned and good friend, Dominic Akuntigira, is that the name?
Akurtinga.
Ayene will not be an efficient and good Attorney General. I cannot, for any moment in my life, say that he will not be a good Attorney General, but it all depends on how he carries out the portfolio of office. I have known him as a legal practitioner through and through, and I know the principles he stands for, and I know what he's capable of doing in that ministry. So I can wish him all the best of luck. And hope that he just sticks into the tenants' ethics and principles that we have all espoused as lawyers over the years. So I wish him well.
There are those who are suggesting that we should look at something else, that whilst the president may be sticking to his 60 limit, the persons appointed to the presidency, a good number of them are ministerial level appointments. Their pegs will be the same like ministers. Apart from the deputy chiefs of staff and the chief of staff and deputy chiefs of staff, as well as the secretary to the cabinet, the rest of the 10 or 11 or so could also be considered as the president, whilst keeping to the 60, is using the back door to satisfy a certain number.
Something I will not sway into that area of argumentation, because let's be fair to ourselves. I mean, ministers are ministers. The office of the president is separate and distinct from ministerial portfolios, unless there is a minister of state in the office of the president. And so far, I think there are only 3 of them. Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, and then 2 others, one for climatic change and sustainability, and the other for special initiatives. Yes, so they are ministers of state. That you can say are ministers, so to speak. But the office of the president, something with all due respect, is separate and distinct from ministers per se. So if even there are appointees or personnel in the office of the president whose office is an equivalent of a ministerial role, yes, but they are not nonetheless in the office of the president. So I don't think we should just marry the two.
Okay.
We can look at the caliber of people and the reasons for why those offices have been set up. And those offices have always been with us. Chief of staff, presidential staffers. You can change the nomenclature in the way you like, but they are people who have always, over the years, worked in the office of the president. So if he has told that line, I don't think there's anything significantly wrong with it. But if you add the 3 ministers of state to the numbers that he has rolled out, we are looking for a remainder of about 18, and that will come from deputy ministerial positions.
That's right.
We have 42 as a president. If you add 18, you get 60. The limit he set for himself. So let us all be encouraged, and see whether he will stick within those limits. Because if there are 23 ministerial offices, because he slashed the number from 30 to 23. So if there's 23 ministers and deputy ministers, that should take us to 46. No, that should take us to 23 times 2. Okay? But I don't know whether some of the ministries are going to be without deputy ministers.
Yeah, we understand so.
That is how it looks like. So then he has 18 to prune out of the 23. So if you take 5 ministerial portfolios out, then you have 18 left out of the 23. So he's bound to appoint 18 deputy ministers of state. Let us see how you can stick. And I think so. Some of the names I can boldly stick out for Govins Kwame Abuja. Of course, as board chairman before, chairman of the governing board of the DVLA, I've had occasion to work with him closely in some areas, and I think he has apart from sometimes his boisterous nature in Parliament, I think he has what it takes to run that ministry. There are many others.
All right, so let's go around. We'll come back to isolate a couple of issues in the ministerial or appointment processes and look at them a lot more thoroughly. Let me now hear from Suleiman Ibrahima. Sule, are you impressed?
Well, Samson, I would say so far it's okay. The elements that I'm looking at, experience in this on issues related to the sectors that these people are being appointed. And I noticed that quite a number of the appointees are persons who previously served as ranking members of the sectors to which they have been appointed. You can talk about Gavin Saboja, you can talk about Kessel Atufosen, you can talk about Okujeto Ablakwa, and I think Akando, Kwadmaminta Akando, who is to health. And if you look at the others, it may turn out to be the same. So these are people who, at least as far as parliamentary duty or duties are concerned, may have been following quite closely the developments in the sectors that they have been appointed to. And that, of course, also includes Honorable Sam George for communications. And I think in the past, he's been in the public domain on matters related to communications quite a lot. The other thing that I'm looking at is the age, if I may call it that way, in terms of how relatively youthful the appointments are compared to perhaps President Akufo-Addo's appointees. And if I may give examples, when President Akufo-Addo took over in 2017, if you look at the age of the appointees to the various sectors, so Owusu Afriya Kuto for Agric, he was 67 then. Eric Opoku, who is the Mahama appointee now, is 54. If you look at Ambrose Derry, he was 60 at the time he was appointed, 2017. Muntaka Mubarak, who is taking over the Interior Ministry, is 53 now. Amwakwata for Roads, 65. Gavin Saboja, 51. Kweku Ajumamenu for Health, 61. Minta Akando, 44. Ken Oforiatta then, Finance, 58. Atufosen, 46. And it goes on and on and on. You can look at Asla Owusu, 52. Sam George, 40. If you look at the position of Chief of Staff, Fremont Pare was then 69 versus Julius Debra, who is 58 now. In terms of age, about 11 years difference. Trade, Alan was 61, Ufoswe Jare is 50 now. Of course, there were other areas that President Akufo-Addo had also appointed persons who you would say are relatively youthful. Youth and sports, defense, Nitiwul, now is Omane Boama. And so, to a large extent, I think President Mahama is doing well in terms of the next generation of leaders. Of course, that is not to say that it means that they will automatically be better than Akufo-Addo's appointees. We are yet to see that. I also like the idea that the president is, to a large extent from the appointment, giving an indication of how he's prioritizing the whole issue of climate change. And so you have him maintain the Ministry of Environment. You have someone appointed as Minister of State in charge of climate change. And then, of course, you do have the Energy Ministry also renamed Energy and Renewables.
Green transition.
For me, that's an indication that the president is giving some priority to the big issue about climate change, which affects literally everything, whether it's about food security or human security or health, the oceans, the forest reserves that we have and all of that. It's all about, the climate crisis. So it's good to see the president prioritizing that.
That's like a reset of sorts that is happening there. And so that may not match to your opening statement when you said it is okay. Okay is not good. Okay is not excellent. Okay is like you are getting to average, right?
Well, I think that we are yet to see a full complement in terms of, deputy ministerial appointments, the chief executives, and all of that. But, well, maybe let me upgrade instead of reset my okay to saying that it looks quite good at this stage. But it's not about how good the appointees are or how good the appointments are. It's about how their performance will be. That, for me, is what is critical. Yes, as I said, the appointees are persons who are quite familiar with the critical issues in the various sectors to which they have been appointed. But sometimes it's not about the skills, it's not about the expertise. I keep saying that at this stage, until something changes, I think our politics and our governance is really about money making. People scramble for positions, people struggle for positions, lobby for positions, because it's all about making money. And we saw under President Akufo-Addo, for example, persons who you would say had decent jobs with the banks, with the insurance companies, and so on. All of a sudden, they leaving to take on positions, within the finance sector. And you would say, look, but if somebody is managing this organization or is a consultant here and so on, why would this person leave this job to become CEO of this or CEO of that? It's all about the monies, the contracts that come with it, the perks, and so on and so forth. So to a large extent, it's about the performance. The president says that he wants to reset the country. He continues to caution the ministers during swearing in that, look, remember that the power you have was given to you by the people, and dare not be arrogant to them, as we saw in the past. I am hoping that they would adhere to that. But not just that, but in terms of the accountability, the transparency, the value for money.
So for you, what will be informing this kind of selection? When it comes to the health ministry, he had a pot, and some people are really surprised that you had the Alex Segbefia had been there before. He's not a medical doctor. You had Dr. Victor Bampo. People mentioned that Victor Bampo may get to that job. Dr. Thomas Anaba, Professor Titus Bayu, who just became an MP, was Deputy General Secretary for the Ghana Medical Association. You have Dr. Soji Tete. There is also the new entrant, Professor Grace Ayensu Dankwa. You have Edward Omane Boama. And so to pick a candor who was doing advocacy and is not known to have expertise and trained for this, what do you think could be accounting for that? Because there are people who are disappointed about this kind of, selection.
Yeah, Samson, I share the same view in terms of a few of the sectors. But I think to a large extent, the president may have been sort of compelled by the constitutional provision to select the majority of his ministers from parliament.
I just pointed to two of the doctors here, three of them actually, who have just become MPs. So he could also pick them. Thomas Anaba, Grace Ayensu, and Titus Bayu, two professors who are specialists in the area.
Yeah, certainly these are very, very accomplished people. I know Dr. Thomas Anaba very well. Dr. Anaba is literally a brother. We come from the same area. I know his contributions to the party. After
the change of government, he was quote unquote hounded out of the Ridge Hospital as a director, exactly. Right?
And he went to court, served on the manifesto committee in relation to health and all of that. So he's been quite a very, very robust supporter and a key contributor to the party. But when you talk to a lot of people with experience in our governance architecture, they would normally say, oh, well, the president may not usually want to give a ministerial position to a first-time member of parliament. And I think, again, that could have been the other consideration. So selecting the majority from parliament, which is a constitutional requirement, and then the whole idea about, well, The president is also looking at persons who may have been in parliament for a couple of times, are familiar with legislative processes,
all right,
are familiar with the issues at the committee level, and would be able to perhaps hit the ground running. I suppose that those may have been some of the constraints. In terms
okay,
of
so you hold your thoughts there. We'll return and look at some of them in some specifics. Let's come to Oliver now. What do you say about the appointments?
I think for me, one of the things I'm most impressed by that is the president's commitment to appoint the entire cohort of cabinet at least within 14 days. It seems like he's managed to do that. So there's a level of expediency that we are seeing in respect to that. But appointment decision-making at the ministerial level is not only a presidential decision. And I know that, of course, the buck stops with the president, but the process by which people get appointed deeply involves the party and even sometimes other constituents beyond the party. And it's a tough job trying to balance all of that. At the end of the day, the president is hoping, rather than say that he has full confidence in everybody in the team, that he brings the leadership that will be able to drive all of them towards a certain goal. He doesn't have those assurances. What's particularly, as Honorable Minister was saying, that politicians generally, when they treat how they have treated the public thing in the past, gives room for concern. And we do know, from our experience of governance, that within the next 4 years, we're going to have likely scandals, people who have stepped out of line, and how the presidents react to them, and is where the test of leadership actually is, not in the initial appointments. But the big thing we ought to be looking forward, we have to avert our mind to, and I think Bash was talking about, was the legal constraint. The biggest of it is the Affirmative Action Act. It says that within the 2024 to 2026, you must have 30% of the ministers. Now, that means 18 people. You have appointed 7. Out of that 18 left, you have to appoint females who are 11 of them. So that's what the biggest...
How about the constitutional injunction for regional balance, all of that?
So as I understand now, almost every region is represented.
Yes.
In that. So those considerations also kind of injunct and hold the hand of the president in this. On the question of, the majority ministers coming from parliament, I think we're not dealing with a majority here. This is the super majority. Because if you take out the regional ministers, you have left with 26. Out of that 26, 23 are MPs. So that's overwhelming majority of substantive cabinet, including cabinet positions and other positions as well. Then within that 23, I think there's one of them, Isufu Seidu, was reported from the presidency as MP, but in fact, he didn't win the seat in Gambaga. So the bigger question for me, as I'm thinking, I think we're going to have a holistic conversation even in terms of constitutional review, is this vexed question about whether or not we can continue to appoint ministers from within Parliament, considering that the convention is evolving that, Suleiman was talking about first-time MPs, maybe not getting an appointment. There's a certain, insistence on parliamentary.
So do this for me. You hold your breath. We take a break. When we return, I do my quick take, and then I come to you to develop your point about your assessment of the ministers. Then we will take some specific areas to look at before we go to the next issue. This is Newsfile, it's the most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. Now, here is something at stake. And this part 2 of punishing the criminal vigilante takeovers. In part 1, I pointed to how the ritual thuggery by party foot soldiers in locking out and violent takeover of government offices was not only unconstitutional but punishable as crimes, because the threats of harm, threats of death that are being issued to these people, officers, assaults that is happening, trespass onto property and damage to property as well, are all arrestable offenses in Ghana. But just somehow we're seeing the police acting unable to deal with this. How funny. where outgoing officials are caught looting, and we have seen some footages to that effect, you can exercise what is a constitutional right to take evidence to prevent it from happening, or you can effect what is known as citizens' arrest. So when these young people, you gather together and go to a place, you feel there's some looting of government property going on, you can take evidence of what is happening and bring in the police. You are required by law to hand over the suspect if you arrested someone. You are not supposed to manhandle them. You're supposed to hand them over to the nearest police officer or police station. And sometimes your fear is that they will not do what is useful. So police the process and make sure they are taken into custody and dealt with. But one effective way to stop this embarrassing ritual is for government to pay attention to the structures as set up by the transition law. There is urgent need to resource the office of the Administrator General and the estates unit as created by the law. The law's requirement is that there should be handing over notes prepared not later than 30 days before the date of the presidential election. Before the presidential election, all the ministers and appointees must have their handing over notes ready. And they are supposed to submit these handing over notes to this Administrator General. The last time we heard about this Administrator General, his office is not attended to at all. He didn't even have a functioning vehicle to do his job. And he has a very big job to do. He takes these handing over notes. He's supposed to retain a copy. He or she is supposed to then take a copy to Parliament, to the Chief Justice, and to the Council of State. And then he would make some copies to be kept at the Public Records and Archives Department. This person is actually appointed with terms, the same terms and conditions, the same as a justice of the Court of Appeal. But look at how we're treating that office. It's not even fit for purpose. There's a presidential estate unit that the Administrator General is supposed to manage. And among his duties is to take and keep an inventory of the assets and properties of the government. All properties and assets which are not vested in the Lands Commission, he is supposed to take care of them and ensure that the assets and properties of government are maintained in good condition and in tenantable repair. And he's supposed to ensure that the assets and properties of government are transferred in good condition and tenantable repair. Tell me, we gave ourselves a good law, but we are not making sure that that office and the officer are doing their job. Those who are supposed to vacate residential facilities, for the president and the vice president, of course, midnight, the president ceases to be, they are supposed to leave. But for the other people, they are giving at least 3 months within which to leave their residences. So there's no point for party foot soldiers to invade people's homes and ask them to leave because the term of a government has expired. And perhaps maybe we should look at amending this law or our laws in a way that we can do the transition in the manner that is done elsewhere, like in the US. Trump had not taken over office, but he had made his appointments, and his appointees were going through the confirmation process. We wanted to do a process where Parliament, the elections will be taking a little back. We stopped it. Can we do that? That will be my take. The unnecessary, violent thuggery and takeovers must stop. And it is criminal, so the police must act. Now, let me get back to here in the studio. I won't take a break. Let me get back to my guest. And it was Oliver who was making a point in his assessment of the ministers. And if you are just joining us, our guests are Bashiratu Kamal, Fellow Center for Social Justice. Inus Hussaini is a former member of parliament, and former minister Frank Davis is chairman of the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee of the NPP. Oliver Bakavomawo is Constitutional Rights and Policy Strategy Advisor at the Democracy Hub. And Suleiman Ibrahima is Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Yes, so you were making a point where we stopped about the balancing act, gender, and I asked the question also about the constitutional injunction on the president to keep a certain regional balance.
Yeah. And I mean, I think when Suleiman was talking, he also brought in other considerations about youth and other things. Bashira to talk about disability. There are different constituencies across the country that want to be represented in the president's appointment and want to see themselves within that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the process of who is chosen would be the best man for the job. It's political. The appointments ensure that there's a certain balance. But the bigger question for us is whether or not the civil service that they're going to be superintended over can function effectively with irrespective of the minister's maybe supposed weakness on the subject matter or any other thing. There's also a big question that we've been talking about now on the assessment whether or not we should go beyond the 60 mark or otherwise. One of the bigger issues is that there's no think tank or independent study that has established what is the efficiency mark, where that is where, for a country like Ghana, in terms of our resources and everything, if you appoint this number of ministers, that is where you have achieved the most effective. In fact, the CRCC, I think, work and the validation process, I think the reason why they ended up 55 is because Baumia had promised 50, John 60, and so let's aim for the middle.
55. Chairman Sabosu confessed on this platform that he influenced
that the process will go to 55,
somewhat,
right? Yeah.
but the committee did not actually agree to it. So they have left their 25 and the 55 as an alternative.
Yeah, and one of the things you mentioned, and I think the last time we had a conversation about this 25 suggestion, was the sneaky appointments of moving people into areas that are similarly ministerial but not quite, because the name is what you're trying to avoid. But one of the things that I know generate a lot of controversy, one, the number of ministers, but also the number of people in the presidency. And so I think what's more likely we're going to see is that a lot of people are going to be appointed technical advisors, special advisors to ministries. This is what Kufuor did many years back. And a lot of that is going to happen because what is driving the conversation is look at the number of MPs you have. You must sort everyone out. And of course, the people who feel like they have made contributions.
But remember, whatever Kufuor did in the presidency did not match Akufo-Addo, which Samuel Kujeto, raised the red flags about almost 1,000.
Listen, I think that I have treated that era as the dark days. So I avoided to use it for any useful constitutional reference or any conventional practices. We want to get away from that.
Yeah.
But I think that they are going to end up in the ministries. And when they end up in the ministries, we don't see them as part of the number of the presidency. So we have to watch for that for those who are interested in efficiency and all of those conversations. What is disappointing to me, and I think that politicians are continuing to allow to do this, is the mobilizing of individuals to attack party offices and things like that, because people have been left out of office. Let's be frank. A lot of people know who are behind them, of the mobilizing young people to do this. And so the conversation about criminal accountability should not only extend to the individuals involved, but some of the people who are bankrolling and moving to, it has to stop. There has to be a point where, there's a certain maturity to how we do government.
You are suggesting that if a group of NDC people in the Volta region burn their office because they are dissatisfied with the appointment, there must be some big person involved. If a group of NDC supporters say, we're going to the GRA because we are not happy with the appointment there, or we are massing up to the NCA because we are not happy with the appointment, we think the guy is MPP, there must be some big guy.
Listen,
who is the real beneficiary.
I have done mobilization for a long time. People don't just stand up and mass up. I can't declare, even for myself and what we do, declare here that meet me here tomorrow and 100 people will show up. It's not going to work. There's a process of calling up people and inviting them and telling them this and that, and so let's show up and do something. So if we were treating it as a normal criminal act, then investigative processes must be, activated to be able to, because it has happened so many times and we sweep it around the carpet. I don't know how many people have ever been prosecuted over these things. And remind you, party assets are public assets.
That's right.
By the law and what the Constitution, the Supreme Court has said. And so this is not something that we continue to sweep under the carpet, to allow room for people to be disgruntled and things like that. Everybody is entitled to be disappointed when not appointed to some process. But what you don't have is the right to be able to take the law into your whole hands in this matter. There's no entitlement to it.
Okay. So now let's get around over the same appointment issues. And Honorable Minister of Sahelian, beginning with you, this envoy to the Alliance of Sahelian States, do you think ECOWAS will be happy about it? Does this sound like an endorsement of these military juntas who have broken away from ECOWAS in a violent way? ECOWAS is not happy about that they should restore democracy?
I think the starting point to answering your question is to look at page 160 of the manifesto of the NDC. And let me read what paragraph 7.1 subparagraph 3 says on page 160 of the manifesto.
And you know also that the president, and I'm saying this to make time for him to get his page that he's referring to, Tuare was invited to the inauguration or swearing in of President Mahama. He got the loudest applause, but the questions also came up. Is it seeking to embrace these military people, or he's rather seeking to influence them to return to democracy? Yes, what's your point?
So there's a two-paragraph preamble on our international relations and foreign policy. That details where we were, how the foreign relations have been marred by certain decisions that we have taken, how NDC intends to reset our foreign relations. And particularly to this end, the next NDC government will, paragraph 3 or subparagraph 3, work strategically to reintegrate the fraternal countries of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger into the economic community of West African states for enhanced regional stability. That's what we say. So the invitation of the head of state of Burkina Faso was strategic. The appointment of Bavulo, strategic, directed towards working with these countries to reintegrate them into ECOWAS. So John Dramani Mahama is not doing anything behind ECOWAS. I mean, he's committed to ECOWAS. He's also committed, as a government, the NDC government is committed to working closely with ECOWAS and the AU. And if you look at our national interests, I mean, it is important to...
Bevulate is a former military official, army official, right? With the feared, regiment of the army. Of course, we also know that he is multilingual,
yes,
so he can fluently express himself when he meets these people. He's accomplished when it comes to international relations, nonetheless.
He was advisor at ECOWAS.
That's correct.
Okay, on military matters and security matters. So he's got that experience. And who is better suited to speak to military men than a former military man who is respected? Who is better suited?
So what's the purpose? What's he going to be telling them?
The purpose was to get them to understand. And people have said, and I agree with them, that the Burkinabe head of state coming to participate in the inauguration of John Dramani Mahama will at least take something away, that your legitimacy as a head of state is enhanced if you receive an overwhelming support from your people through the ballot box. You saw it clearly. It's clearly. And that if given an opportunity, I'm sure as we continue to look at Burkina Faso, in their transition to democracy, probably the head of state will want that.
Interesting. What do you say about the minorities' accusation that there are appointments being made, particularly to the presidency, in violation of the Presidential Office Act, which requires consultation with the Council of State? The Council of State is yet to be constituted. The EC has just advertised the elections.
Exactly. I like your concluding bit. So it reveals what Vamawo and others in Magusev have been saying. That reveals a design flaw or structural flaw within our constitution. The constitution thinks and anticipates that by the time a president makes his appointments, a council of state will be in place. Okay? That is the position of the constitution. And so the Presidential Transition, the Office of the President Act takes that view and says that, so if a president is to appoint people to the office of the president, he needs to consult the Council of State. But as we speak, there is no Council of State. Was John Dramani Mahama willful? Or was it a reckless neglect?
He's supposed to wait until the Council of State is in place.
So I say that we should look at it. Thinking about that, when I heard the minority say what they said on the floor of Parliament, I said, look, was it the intention of the framers of the Constitution that we must have a Council of State that straddles governments? Was that their intention? Because otherwise, there was no way a Council of State whose term of office is coterminous to the office of the president can be in place when the president is making appointments.
The president
so you must look at the design.
And the president who cannot wait?
Cannot wait. The business of government cannot wait. So you have to look at the design or structural flaw and fix that. And when you fix that, you will get the Office of the President Act right.
Okay, hold on. Sule, what do you make of these two situations about the Ibrahim Touare's coming in and not more importantly, designating an envoy, Larry Bevrolate, to the Sahelian Alliance of Sahelian States, these places held by military juntas, and this question of appointments in violation of the requirement to consult Council of State?
Well, Samson, I think that I should say I was in the course of this week, Tuesday and Wednesday, Wednesday and Thursday, I was privileged to be part of a regional level engagement of very high level representatives from civil society, from multilateral organizations, including senior officials from the AU and ECOWAS. And from the conversation, this was one of the things that came up. And the indication that I got was that I think the best foot forward for ECOWAS now in terms of the ongoing engagements and mediation efforts to get these three countries to stay, the best foot now appears to be President Mahama. He's been there before as president, had good relations with these three countries. And if you remember, Burkina Faso took a very serious exception to what President Akufo-Addo did when he visited the US in terms of accusing the Burkinabe authorities of using their mineral resources to pay Russia to do certain things. And obviously the president had to send a delegation to basically try and soften the anger on the part of the Burkinabes. Now, the other thing is that at the ECOWAS level, we know that the president of Senegal and the president of Togo have been appointed to sort of mediate and try and see if they can bring these people back. The truth of the matter is that, of course, every president is president, but we do know that the Senegalese president, fairly young, hadn't actually been in politics before. And so in terms of experience and all of that, I think it's a bit on the downside. You talk about Togo, and people say that, look, these guys, what they've done in their three countries, the Burkina, Mali, Niger, we are talking about what undemocratic governance, throwing away the constitution or, abrogating the constitutional order and so on. And people say that the president in Togo is literally doing the same thing. This is someone who opposed to efforts to have term limits, somebody who keeps changing the constitution, and the latest he did was to amend the constitution and have himself as prime minister. Meanwhile, there is no president, and basically have himself in power for life. And how can ECOWAS that says, look, we are opposed to unconstitutional governments and undemocratic processes, have this person to lead the mediation? So I think President Mahama, is taking some strategic steps to bring these people back.
Okay.
In terms of the Council of State and the ministerial thing, I'm not a lawyer, as you know, but I think if the law requires that, it is possible to do it. Between the period when the president is declared president-elect, all the way to swearing in, nothing stops the president from having, those that he wants to nominate as Council of State members nominated, because it's not all by elections. And in fact, if the Constitution requires that, as soon as the president is elected, we can do the election for the regional representatives, knowing very well that as soon as the president is sworn in, there must be a Council of State that enables him to make appointments. But we don't create a situation where the Constitution requires it, no effort is made to fulfill the constitutional requirement, and then we say, oh, it's impossible because once the president takes over, there is no way he can have the Council of State in place.
Thank you. Let me go to Frank Davis and also Bashira too. Yes, Frank Davis, what do you say? If we need to unite some people within the region, Mali, Burkina, Senegal, Niger. Why should that be the job of Ghana? Is it not an ECOWAS job?
Yes. Thank you, Samson. In the first place, I think my good friend Inusa struggled to justify what went on. But I must say, with the greatest of respect, that I just had to bow down my head in shame when I saw Burkinabe military junta head of state or government or whatever come to the inauguration, and the young man came strapped, with a gun by his side, and he was looked on all the way to go and shake hands with our president with still his gun by his side. Come on. You see, no matter what Inusa says, my good friend Inusa, I want to disagree with you, like people say, violently on this matter. We should not, for the fun of it, do things that will come back to haunt us. Now, in any event, if I'm to go by your logic, how come he invited only the Burkinabe head of state and left out Mali and Guinea? I think they are a holy trinity. So why do you invite one and leave the other? Look, this business of government is business of government. This is not to encourage him to know that democracy is good. That young man knows what is democracy. And he knows that you can only be elected president of your country when the people have voluntarily gone to the polls to elect you as their leader. You don't pick up a gun and go and sack a democratically elected government and think that you have the support of the people. Yes, we all see when these things happen, the people rise up, and they say all kinds of things. But deep down, people know that it is wrong. So he should be told that whatever he did was wrong. And for him to come to our inauguration in the midst of the international community and all that, what are we? Look, even if Mahama, even if His Excellency John Mahama is the best person for that slot, whatever he has to do should not be overt. It should be covert. He should do it in a way, maybe appealing to them as a backside, but to front them as if a democratic change of government can translate into a coup d'etat. And if I might stretch it, that is what is happening all over the place. People are running into offices, closing down offices, demanding that people should leave their offices for them to take over. Such unnecessary interference with our governance. Because they have seen a military head of state come to this country. So they think that the democratically change of government from the NDC to the NPP is a coup d'etat. So they go to offices and ransack offices. The military.
In 2017, no military person came to the inauguration, but these takeovers happened.
Yes, Samson, you cannot read the mind construct of any human being. If I stand with you, Samson, and we are talking, you cannot for the minute anticipate that I'm going to stab you. But that is a human mind. That is the construct. So even if in 2017, they were not invited and they are military juntas, you can't hold a democratically elected government responsible for that. I mean, who told them to go and pick arms? If they wanted to be president, they should have contested for elections. So I don't buy that argument. They have decided that they will do it because they know that at the end of the day, some other governments will side with them and go and make amends and peace with them. But we should let them understand that at any particular point in time, what they do, anybody who picks up the gun to unlawfully terminate the governance of the democratically elected government should be told that what you have done is wrong. If they have decided to form their own court, we should leave them.
Okay.
We should do it in a very responsible manner, but not openly.
Yeah.
And I think
quickly, what's your solution to the absence of Council of State when the president is constituting his office?
Yes, I think I want to side greatly with the last speaker. What was his name?
Suleimana.
Suleimana, yes. You see, we should find time for things which are necessary and don't devote time to things which are not necessary. Now, there is a huge and ample space between when there's a president-elect and when he's sworn in. The process of constituting the Council of State, I don't think is so enormous that it cannot be done. Now, the office of the president-elect, whatever that nomenclature means, it found no grounding in our constitution. There's nothing like that. But on that same strength, His Excellency the President constituted an oral committee. He constituted an oral committee within that period. Now, why couldn't that period be used to also pick nominations for the Council of State? Because that is imperative. That is a constitutional imperative.
Would you have supported that even before he is sworn in, he should constitute the process for a Council of State?
Well, but if he was minded to constitute a committee of oral, I mean, why couldn't he have that fortitude to do that?
Council of State is a constitutional body.
I know something. But I'm just drawing an analogy. So don't let me. All I'm saying that we can find the time to do things which are necessary, and we should not always bargain with the issue of lack of time. Because if something has to be done, it ought to be done.
Okay.
So let us, all of us, try that within the constraints of time, we will be minded to do things which are right.
Thank you very much.
We can't find ways of doing these things if we put our mind to it. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Even though it's a bit challenging, but whatever we set our minds to do, if we have the sense of conviction and purpose, we are able to do it.
Thank you very much. Bashiratu Kamal, what do you say? Hello, Bashiratu. Please unmute your mic. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. Can you take the question again?
What do you say about the issues of unconstitutionality in appointing presidential staffers, where there's a requirement to consult with Council of State and there's no Council of State, military juntas in the sub-region, in the Sahel, we have an envoy to go and work with them?
Well, I think that in terms of the constitutional matters, what is quite interesting are two things that Samson you picked up and also Alhaji Fuseni also picked up. And that has to do with the issue around election organizing and the period for swearing in. And the question would be, do we think it would be right like that for a president-elect to begin making appointments before the swearing in? But then what are the implications for that? And we've always complained about the period between elections, 7th December, after the elections and the collation and declaration, and the time that is available for a president-elect to prepare and the transitional team to also get ready for the handing over period. But we've always complained that it is too short a time. And in the past, we've also made arguments around, in the case of runoff, it is always hectic for Ghanaians. And
That's
it
right.
is always an issue that puts a lot of pressure on all of us. So it is a critical thing that needs to be looked at. Then on the issue about the appointment, Frank made a comparison between ORA and the appointment by the president. And the question would be, where in our policies or constitutional mandates do we have ORA written? And whether there are any constitutional issues surrounding whether ORA is a committee that should stand or should not stand, or the president had a right to do it or had no right to do it in that way. So I think in terms of the constitutional mandates of the president, it's clear. ORA is just a committee that the president promised Ghanaians in the manifesto of the NDC, and he did just that. And there are no constitutionalities surrounding the issue of having ORA instituted. Mm-hmm. Then on appointment, I mean, you see, it is quite interesting that Ghanaians have already started asking for accountability. People are asking accountability in terms of when is the dollar coming down? We need a president to act on this. School feeding program. There are a whole lot of issues coming.
Galamsey.
So imagine if we, Galamsey, you know, there was a presser recently. So imagine, and you see, also let us remember that some of our institutions are seasonal in nature in terms of the type of work that they do. A critical example is Ghana Cocoa Board, that their activities are seasonal. So if there is no chief executive and the season for planting and doing specific thing passes, it means we have all lost out. So in this sense, do we wait for the president, for the Council of State to be constituted before the president makes appointment to some of these critical institutions? But we know the implication it is going to have on all of us. So like Alhaji mentioned, there is, we have an opportunity to look at some of these things to do right by ourselves, so that we do not come back to having these discussions every other 4 years. Now, finally, on the issue about the juntas, I'm not a security expert, but what I can say is that we are in the crossroads of having the collective interest, that is by being members of ECOWAS, and our individual interest as a country. And also balancing it all. Maybe, just maybe, I'm just speculating that the president didn't just invite Traore, but extended invitation to them. And then they decided to settle on him representing the other people. So for now, we are not sure whether he's the only person the president extended invitation to. There also is the issue about what is our relationship with these countries in terms of trade, in terms of other critical issues. So do we allow the issues that is currently running in ECOWAS, when we are not sure when it is going to be resolved, mar the relationship we have with them so that it affects every other thing that we do with them in terms of our bilateral relationship with all of them as a country? It's something we also need to think about. Okay. And why thinking about all, let me say this, that one critical issue that came up at the Democracy Hub program has been, until we are able to work around issues around funding for political parties, we are always going to come back to these issues about appointments and people feeling so entitled, because we do not know what has happened behind closed doors with regards to funding for these political parties. So people negotiate, people strike deals, to send money or to support political parties, and it is something that we need to look at.
Right, that was an issue. That was an issue that Professor Kofi Abuchi was very passionate about. But in 30 seconds, tell me, were you one of those who was not also, enthused about the appointment of Joyce Bawah Muktari? You had expected that she would get foreign minister or some other ministerial, properly so-called job?
Yes, to be honest with you, Samson, I was very disappointed. Also because, I mean, she's done this job with the president for 8 years or whatever years, and she's been doing it. So why would we still want to keep her there? But also, it comes back to the point about in whatever position that you find yourself, it is about you and how you make the position.
Thank you very much.
Attractive and effectiveness and efficient. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think I saw that you expressed disappointment in that appointment.
Yes. I mean, I'll come. Well, let me perhaps start with it and come to the other issues. One of the biggest thing about Joyce's role with the NDC is that she has the misfortune of being a relative of the president. And because of it, a lot of people continuously view her as somebody who must be in a role of special aid, special assistant to the president, things like that. But we are seeing what she has done in terms of championing policy issues in terms of how the NDC has contested the elections and her role in the process. And I'm thinking that for her own maturity within the party and how she's perceived, a role that removes her away from the president is perhaps something which is better for her in terms of long term. And that's why I think that an appointment other than back to the presidency or special aid would have been best suited for her. And I was disappointed that it feeds into this thinking and narrative that, Joyce is family, and so she'll serve with their cousin. That's where my disappointment is.
Our presidents are known to keep their family close to them.
Well, I haven't seen that
part of their own protection.
I haven't seen that a lot of them. I mean, I remember Kufuor with the brother as Minister of Defense, but I haven't seen that much here. But she has been, she has been Deputy Minister before. So I think she was transport.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what my thinking there. And it is not a view that Kujetua Blackwell, who is a very good friend of mine, does not deserve the role. It's more a question of whether she should go back into that role again.
Right.
On the other issues, yes, there was a diplomatic faux pas in the president's appointment of Bevlo, but not that the appointment itself. So one of the things, there's the alliance of Sahel states. And it's true that ECOWAS appointed an envoy, but the difference is that ECOWAS appointed a special envoy to the 3 states, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. We have appointed an envoy to the alliance of Sahel states, which is a recognition of the so-called regional body in competition with ECOWAS. So in terms of the nomenclature, that's where probably there's a problem is, because you're mindful careful what you are recognizing in terms of your diplomatic footprint. But however, in terms of the attempts of rapprochement, I think it's spot on. And the appointment of Bevlo being a security person, the principal reasons why they left ECOWAS were for security reasons. And that they're saying that they're changing or reforming their alliance is for security reasons. They're saying that there are nations at war and so need the military in charge of those countries, whether or not we have diplomatic inclinations or not. I join Frank Davis in his consternations about military and our democracy and things like that. I also truly believe that our presidents are under a constitutional injunction to ensure that democracy is preached abroad. But we should not forget that the Guinean president who had changed his constitution to allow him third term was the one who was invited when Nana was being sworn in to speak. A few days after that is when he was overthrown because he tried to change his constitution. So if you're asking for diplomatic consistency, we need to have that. I know that there was a delegation led by Alfred Mahama to both Mali and Niger as well to invite those presidents. In the end, they were represented by their prime ministers. So it's not that it's only Traoré who was invited to the event, but all the others were also invited as part of the president's attempt to do rapprochement on this issue. So if the long-term objective, which aligns with what the NDC is saying, that they want to bring them back to the fold, I think it's a good thing. I have seen report that Nyasigbe is also planning to join the alliance. But we must truly question ECOWAS on this. If somebody like Nyasigbe can change the constitutional rules and democratic rules and continue to stay in office, and we are claiming that there's some democratic ethic that exists within ECOWAS itself, I don't think that's consistent.
Let me understand you. In one breath, you begin by saying this is a diplomatic faux pas. To me, is a significant embarrassment or mistake to have appointed Bevlo for this job.
Not for the job, to the alliance of Sahel states. So you can appoint a special envoy to the countries. But if you appoint to the alliance of Sahel states, you have recognized the alliance.
Okay.
Which is not ECOWAS's position.
I get that.
So that's where it is in terms of the nomenclature
of
that.
All right.
But yes, in terms of appointing somebody to lead the charge, I think that It has to happen, and it's good that it's Bevlo who understands the concerns of these states in that role.
The constitutional situation, is it a lacuna we need to fill, or
with the Council of State?
Yes.
No, actually, there's no problem with the Constitution on that.
Well,
I mean, my views are well known.
You don't want a Council of State.
No, yes, my views are well known on that. Yes. But the problem actually here is not constitutional.
Okay.
That we are trying to contort ourselves to give the president-elect to share executive power with existing president. No, the problem is the Presidential Office Act, which brings the Council of State and gives it a statutory role, which badly anticipates the question of timing. So the reform would be to the Transition Act. You can remove the Council of State as it has no play in who is appointed to the president, office of the president, and the problem is solved. So it's not a constitutional mandate. It's something the Parliament gave them and misjudged the timing on that one.
Interesting. So I'm going for a quick break. We'll return to go to Obuasi to find out what exactly happened. An eyewitness that Joy News spoke about the fact that they were in excess of 300 of them, and that they were just looking for their daily bread. And these are abandoned pits, mining pits by Anglo that they went to. Well, they needed to break some walls, fences to get in there. And these are also manned by the military. The military high command, the statement they issued. Now, this eyewitness says that when the military came on them armed, all of them went on their knees, pleading with them that they had not come there to cause trouble, but to find food. And nonetheless, they started to fire, their guns, and as they ran, they shot at them from the back, leading to the several deaths that happened and the many who have been injured in the circumstances. But the military statement said that these guys went there in the night around 1 p.m., midnight, and began to shoot at the armed officers. And the armed officers also had to, as it were, protect themselves. In self-defense, they shot. Which of these accounts do you believe? Well, you may not have to believe any of them. Let's get to some of the details to find out which of the accounts may be closer to the truth. I'll share some of your messages with you also shortly. But before we take the break, is there any substantial issue you want to reply to or something of the sort? Any one of you?
No.
Okay.
There are no substantial issues, except that I agree with it.
Yes. You and then, yes, I'll come to you. Yeah.
Well, there are two in the Office of the President Act and the Constitution. There are two approaches. One, if the Constitution, amend the Constitution will take you, a long process. Yes, it's a matter of mistiming. Do we remove the consultation of Council of State and say probably inform Parliament? Okay, because the Council of State would not have been in existence at the time that. So you need a second institution to know what the president is doing, and the Constitution settled on the Presidential Act settled on the Council of State, and now there's a problem. So we can amend the Constitution. So I've been looking at the two. So I agree with you entirely.
Okay, but you had said earlier that it's a question of practicality, like Suleimana and also Frank Davis. We can constitute the Council of State as quickly as possible. So why don't we do it? Maybe we go back to when Marita Brew went to Parliament seeking to bring back the elections to November rather than in December. So we have sufficient time to do all of these things.
Then you have to settle on the issue of what role does a president-elect play.
That's right.
In the constitutional architecture.
Thank you. Yes, Frank Davis, you wanted to say something.
I heard my sister, was the name Bashiratu, say something about my comments on the oral, but I want to place this on firm record that you see when we try to let things pass and not comment on it, becomes a problem. You see, there's nothing about the fact that there was an office of the president-elect. But that office of the president-elect has no constitutional mandate. There's nothing, nowhere in the Constitution that you see office of the president-elect. There's nothing. I'm yet to see anything of the sort. So if the president-elect and not sworn in, he is a de facto president, he's not de jure. We are all lawyers, you know that. So within that space of time, of him being the president-elect and being sworn in, what executive authority does he exercise? Because there's always a sitting president before the midnight of 6th January. And that office of president is not coterminous with the office of the president-elect, whatever that means.
Professor Kweku Asare has asked questions. He and Oliver have been asking that President Mahama has constituted a constitution review committee. There has not been hue and cry about it as to what mandate he has to do that. But he constitutes an oral committee and hell breaks loose. Why?
Something I'm commenting on something someone said. So let's there's a special devoted space for constitution. So when we get there, we'll discuss this. But let me talk about it, because this oral thing is gaining too much prominence, and we have to put it where it belongs. You see, there is nobody. I'm not questioning the setup of that committee. I think if we have to do things right, we have to do them properly. All I'm saying is that the office of the president-elect does not warrant the president sworn in now setting up a committee of oral, because there is no constitutional basis for it. So people should not say that it is not constitutional. There is no office like office of president-elect, for which at the time that President Mahama constituted that committee, what executive authority he exercised. Because the office of the president-elect is de facto, it's not de jure. And there was always a sitting president. So was he competing with the sitting president? That is my question.
Thank you very much.
So don't let us box the two up. I'm not saying the morale for the setup of the committee is fine, but let's do things properly. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much. You were supposed to be a minute's reaction. Did Sule indicate that you wanted to say something?
Yes, Samson. On the question of appointments and ministries, I think those of you who are lawyers would do us a lot of good if you were to look at the Security and Intelligence Act 2020, I think it's Act 1030 or so, because my reading suggests that once that law is still in place, there ought to be a Minister for National Security, because the law designates a minister, a ministry, provides its functions, and those functions actually include the National Security Coordinator serving under the minister. So at some point, in terms of the functions of the minister, it includes giving directives and directions to the National Security Coordinator, and in fact also includes presenting reports to Parliament. And from what President Mahama brought out, that ministry, as people would say, has been scrapped. And I'm wondering if there is a law requiring that ministry be set up, can we just set it aside and move on? When the minister in charge of that, national security, would be responsible for both the internal security agencies and external security agencies. The Minister for Interior, as we all know, is in charge of internal security issues. So is it possible that, even with the existence of that law, we can just overlook it and then scrap that ministry?
Okay, thank you. So that we don't bring up a whole new issue to get into our time, let's hear you quickly. You wanted to respond to
just
that.
In terms of how we draft legislation, Parliament has no authority or power to create a minister or a ministry. So what you have is that it will say the president will assign ministerial responsibility to somebody over it. So ministerial responsibility can be assigned to defend, the Minister for Defense or any other thing. So a minister responsible for something, a portfolio, and that can be assigned to anybody, but you don't have to appoint a Minister for National Security specifically on that.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a break here, and when we return, we are going to Obuasi, and one of you watching or listening by radio or however, you say that's Alhaj Suleiman, okay, so watching from abroad, says that eyewitness account is not true. I know people in Obuasi who told me the boys overpowered the first layer of security, private security, then overpowered the second layer, that is police, and then faced off with the third layer, that is the military. That's the kind of security architecture at the place. So to clash with the soldiers, you have to first go through 2 layers of security as described earlier. Interesting. How bold could these people be? We'll be right back.